Welcome back, everyone. Today I started playing in the final match here in the American Cup, which is being held in St. Louis, Missouri. Now, as you guys know, I won all of my matches in the champions bracket. However, one of the players did come out of the elimination bracket, and that would be Wesley So. So obviously I'm playing against Wesley here, and we start our new match of 2 games of classical chess, 90 minutes plus 30-second increment from move number 1. As the highest rated player, I start with the white pieces. Let's jump right into the game. So I start by playing this move c4, obviously a very explosive move, also known as the classic English opening. Wesley plays e5, I go knight to c3, knight f6, knight f3, and here Wesley plays knight c6. Now, we are going to focus on my game, but I do want to add one little addendum. One line that I did look at quite a bit this morning, and I can say this since I'm not a pro chess player anymore, is I did look at this move e4, knight g5, and c6. Now, it's a very topical line. It's been played a lot at the top level. However, you have to know exactly what you're doing with the black pieces. And in the other game, in the women's bracket between Irina Krush and Alice Lee tried to play this with the black pieces. It's a little bit too computerish, too hard to play, and she ended up down a pawn out of the opening, and she would lose very quickly. So Wesley plays knight c6, and here I decide to play e4. Now, those of you guys who are watching my recaps on YouTube all the way back in the great year of 2019, when I was a professional chess player, trying to play this great game and earn a hard-earned living. I know it's redundant, but I was trying to earn a living playing chess professionally. Now, I played this against Samuel Sevian. We did do recaps from the 2019 US Championship, so I will obviously put a link in the description to that game in case you want to see me explain things like a proper chess player, not using all these ridiculous terms like the juicers, the wooden shield, the kebabs, blah, 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 blah. At any rate, you guys, I did play e4 against Sevian. He did play bishop b4, d3, d6, a3, bishop c5, b4, bishop b6, knight a4. This is the same game that I had against Sam Sevian in 2019. But after bishop g4, bishop e2 in that game from the US Championship, Samuel Sevian decided to, I think he traded first on f3 and played this move knight d7. And after takes, and bishop b2, I got a great position and I did go on to win. If you guys want to see that game, I'll put it in the description, as I said before, so you can see that recap as well. At any rate, knight d4 is played by Wesley here. I take, and now I castle. Wesley plays queen d7, and I go bishop b2, trying to force Wesley to decide what to do with this knight. Black has a great bastion here with the knight on d4. Speaking of random terms that I'm using in this modern age, Black temporarily has this bastion on d4, but I'm trying to trade off the knight. Now, if Black were to castle after takes, Black has 2 sets of double pawns here, and he's in a little bit of trouble. So Wesley decides to trade the knight for the bishop, castles, and now I go queen e2. You'll notice that Black doesn't really have any control over this d4 square anymore, and I also have this great bishop on b2 with the idea of playing d4 and creating a big white center, or trying to break with f4 and open up the diagonal as well. So I have 2 pawn pushes here that I can try to use to open up the diagonal for the bishop. So in this position, Wesley plays rook f8. Now, before the game, I had looked at this move queen g4, and after f3, queen g5, d4, knight h5, and g3. Computer says that after knight to f4 or even c5, Black is doing okay, but again, it's a fairly simple position, and it's pretty easy to play. So Wesley decides to play rook e8. I go f4, very thematic move, trying to open up this long diagonal for the op. If Black were to take, I'm able to triple up these pawns, and after rook takes f4 here, I'm doing really, really well, because at some point I'm going to create a double stack, or maybe I can create the legendary triple stack here with the rook and the queen, and it's really, really good for white. So Wesley does not open up the diagonal. He plays b5, trying to chip away at my center. Now, if I were to play a move like h3, while it might not work in this exact position, it's worth noting that after pawn takes, f4, this pawn on e4 can become a little bit weak, since I no longer have this pawn here on d3 to support the pawn on e4. So I choose to play c5 here. Wesley plays queen to e6. I go rook c1. Idea very simply to try and open up the c file and create the classic kebab, because after, say, h6 takes rook c7, the rook is really active on the 7th rank. So Wesley decides to play c6 here, which sort of closes down the c file, but it also creates a nice little set of these 3 pawns which guard each other very nicely. So here I decide to take on d6. Now, this move is a move that I played during the game. I wasn't 100% sure if it was a great move or not. I also did consider this move f5, but after Black goes queen e7 and I trade, if I can't force in this d4 pawn push to open up the scope for this op on b2, it's going to be very hard to do anything. So one illustration is, let's just say I go g4, knight d7, rook d1, queen e7. If I could somehow force this trade of the pawns and get this open diagonal for the bishop, this could be good for me. But it's very hard to do it because if I play d4 in a position like this and I take with the bishop, I hang this pawn, but I also hang this pawn too. So I hang both of these juicers, and that is the big issue here with going for the structure with pawn takes pawn, is that it's very hard to play this pawn push without severely weakening this pawn on e4. So I decided not to do this, although computer thinks after takes and g4, maybe I can play g5 and something like queen e3, and perhaps white is better. But again, it's very hard for me to judge because I'm pushing p on the king side, but is it really going to lead to an attack, or is it all for show? So instead I decided to take. Wesley plays knight d7. He does not capture on d6 because then he gets forked by pawn takes pawn, since the bishop guards the pawn on e5, and I should be winning material. Wesley chooses to play knight d7 instead. Temporarily, he's down a pawn, but he hopes to win this pawn on d6 and equalize the material very, very soon. I go queen to f2 here, and now Wesley plays f6, not queen takes pawn, because after pawn takes pawn, let's just say black takes on d3. There are many ways for me to win, but the simplest is to take and then play e6, opening up the great diagonal for this bishop, and I'm going to be checkmating or winning some material very, very soon. So Wesley plays f6 here to overprotect this pawn on e5, and now if I were to take, black can actually just capture with the knight, which keeps this f file closed. Now my queen and rook look very stupid without any squares on the 7th rank, and black will eventually win this pawn on d6 and equalize the material. It's worth noting also, the knight here is very good because if I play d4, black can fork me with knight to d3, or even go to c4 and create the great bastion with this knight here protected by this pawn on b5. So instead I play d4 here, Wesley takes, and now I play this move e5. Now I spent a lot of time up to this point because I was up about half an hour since I had blitzed out the opening, and initially I wanted to play queen takes pawn, queen takes and rook takes and d5, trying to open up the c file, get that kebab with the rook on c7, but unfortunately this is not a great choice because black has this nasty move rook to a6. What I had looked at during the game when I played d4 was this move rook to c8, and after rook f e1, takes, and rook e7, I get a kebab on e7, great rook, I have this great pawn here that supports the rook. After rook d8, bishop d4, it really feels very, very good for white. Now the computer of course is unimpressed and it says black is totally fine, but for us humans, very hard to play such a position. However, after rook to a6, if I play rook e1 here, black can simply take the pawn, and when we trade the rooks on e4 and I try to get the kebab with rook c7, black just takes the pawn on d6 and black is completely winning. So I completely overlooked this, which is why I did change my plan at the board and play this move e5 instead. Wesley takes, and now he takes back with the knight. Now, black could have played rook to f8, but it feels very hard to play because after queen d4, g5, while black is blockading these two pawns with the queen and the knight, it's very hard for black to progress because after, say, takes, not rook e1, sorry, rook e1, and say rook f5, black can't really do anything with the queen or the knight. I can maybe move the king and start to use the h file, and if black ever moves the queen, then I open up the scope, and I'm going to get a checkmate on this long diagonal. So Wesley decides to take on e5 instead. I play rook to e1. Now, this was a very tough decision because obviously we're playing a two-game match. These are not one-off games. And in a match situation, generally, you don't want to let the game become too complicated. You want to keep it where it's fairly balanced so you have chances to win. And worst case, you can always bail out, like, the Federal Reserve likes to bail out banks, where you can bail out and make a draw if there's nothing there. So in retrospect, probably what I did is not what I would do again based on it being a match format versus being one-off games. But you know what? Bailouts are for I don't know what to say. Bailouts are for somebody, but not for me. So after knight takes e5, I decide to play rook c to e1 instead of simply trading and going d7, rook d8, and rook d1, followed by rook to e1 and making a draw. I decide to play rook c e1, pinning the knight on e5 here, and now Wesley has to be very, very careful. I think there's only one move that doesn't lose the game. If black takes the pawn on d6, I can go queen takes f4, and now he has problems due to this pin of the knight and the queen. And if black tries to move the knight here, I go queen f7 check, king h8, and bishop takes g7, and that's game over. Additionally, there really are no other moves for black in this position. You can't go knight f7 because then I take and the rook and the queen guard each other, and you're just going to lose this knight and lose the game as well. So Wesley plays queen d5. It's worth noting queen f6 is another move walking into a pin, but after queen to f6 here, I can play this move rook to e4, setting up the double stack on the e file, and black is simply tied up in knots, and he will lose the game. So Wesley plays queen d5, the only move here, because now if I go rook d1, black can play knight d3 in between, forking the queen and the bishop. And now it gets very tricky for white to play. If I play queen c2 on first glance, it looks like I'm winning, because after rook to e3 guarding the knight, I have bishop c1 winning the rook on e3. But here black has this nasty move, queen c4, breaking the pin. And when I trade the queens and I win the rook, black is actually winning here because his pawn is going forward really fast to e2, forking the 2 rooks. And with the knight covering this critical square for the pawn to get down to the end of the board, black is actually winning here. So instead I play queen e2, trying to pin this knight again, and now everything becomes very forcing. Wesley plays this move, knight to c4. It is worth noting that there is this move, f3 takes, a knight to g6, which apparently the computer says black is doing great here, because after takes, and king f7, my king side is a little bit compromised, and black can get a knife to f4 down the road, creating some mating threats. So say I go like rook e3, knife f4. Now if I like move the bishop, there's queen g5 and queen g2, checkmate. So I do have to be somewhat careful here. But of course, Wesley and I were only humans at the end of the day, and neither of us saw his concept with knight g6, so Wesley plays knight c4 instead. I sack the queen for the 2 rooks, and after takes, king f7, rook e7, king g6, I play this move rook g7, king h6, and this move bishop a1. Now, it's time to take stock of the position, as I was doing during the game, where I have 2 rooks for the queen, but black has a great knight on c4. Now the king is kind of on the edge, but if I don't get something really fast, black can create a great bastion with the knight and the pawn. Now already here, I had a feeling that I should be doing very well, but with limited time and no second time control, only 25 minutes, you sort of have to budget your time a little bit differently, and here I did a very poor job of that. I actually used way too much time playing bishop a1, because my initial idea was to play bishop c3, but after knight to e3, rook c1, black has this ridiculous move, knight to d1, attacking the bishop on c3. If I move the rook to, say, capture a pawn, after knight takes bishop, rook takes knight, there's queen d4 check, winning the rook. And if I move the bishop to a1, black goes queen d2, attacking the rook and threatening to set up the classic ice skater checkmate with queen to e1. So say I go rook b1, there's queen e1, and the king simply is stuck here with no squares. And if I say push a pawn to create the Lufthansa here for the king, black just takes the rook and wins the game anyway. So I do have to be very, very careful here, and I spent a lot of time because bishop c3 was my intention, and then I realized it didn't work, so I played this move bishop a1. Now there's another very tricky line, which if I was a 3500 rated stonkfish, I would have found, which is this move bishop f6, because after queen takes d6, I have this tricky move g4. As you guys may or may not know, this move end peasant is not required in chess. Black does not have to take the pawn here. He can actually play this move knight to e3. But during the game, when I calculated this, I saw knight e3, and I thought, you know what, if I go g5, the king is on the loose, and black is actually winning here. So without a mating idea with g5 or bishop g5, how can I play this? Because with this great knight, this great bastion, this queen coming to d5 or d2, creating checkmates, I should be lost. But there is this very tricky move, rook to g8 here, which threatens a different checkmating concept, because if black takes the rook, I have bishop g5, which is simply checkmate, king has no squares. Now, during the game, I didn't see this. If I had, maybe I would have played g4, but I missed this idea of rook g8 and bishop g5 checkmate. However, the computer says that after knight takes pawn, stopping the checkmate, because black is king h5, rook g4, queen f6, rook takes f4, and probably queen to g5. Black should be able to draw this here after king h1, queen e5, rook f3, and say king 2. I don't know if g6 or g5 is best, but eventually after h5, black can play b6 and c5, create a passed pawn, and the queen should be worth as much as the 2 rooks. So I could have played bishop f6 again. As I said, I spent a lot of time here. I played bishop a1, Wesley played knight to e3, and now I found this move h4. Now this is a double exclam move because I was trying to come up with concepts to set up ways to checkmate this king on h6. So I found this h4 move, which is very nasty, because if black takes the rook, I have rook to g5 here, since the pawn guards the rook. If you take the pawn, I checkmate with bishop to g7, and uh-oh, spaghetti-o, the king simply has no squares. And if black plays, let's just say queen f7, I go check, takes, and now d7, I make a new queen, and that's all she wrote as well. So I felt very good, but the problem is, since I spent those 12 minutes to play bishop a1, now after queen d3, I simply did not have enough time to figure out what the next move should be. So at this point, I'm trying to figure it out. I'm getting low, and I play this move rook takes f4, which is actually the best move, but if I was going to play it, I should have done it right away. And in retrospect, based on how the game ended up progressing, I think I would have probably played rook c1, queen d2, rook b1, queen c2, rook e1, queen d2, and simply made a draw with the repetition if I could do it again. But as we like to say in the great language of Latin, I know it's a dead language these days, or at least outside of Vatican City, there's this great saying, I think it's Fortis Fortuna Juvat, which is, of course, fortune favors the bold. I think also, since John Wick is pretty popular right now, I think the Keanu Reeves character of John Wick does have that tattooed on his back, if I remember correctly. At any rate, I'm getting way off topic. So after queen to d3, I do play rook takes f4, queen d1 here, and now I make a huge mistake. I play this move king to f2. What I should have played was king to h2, and this was in fact my initial idea, but at the end of the day, I'm not Stonkfish, and I can't calculate like Stonkfish, so I miscalculated this. Wesley and I, after the game, both thought queen takes d6 would simply draw the game, because after rook to f7, there's knight to d5, pinning the rook on f4. And we thought, well, the best case that I have here is something like g3, knight takes f4, check, takes, and king g6. And this should be a draw since material is even. We both have 4 pawns on the board, but it can't be anything more. And if anyone can try to win, it's going to be black, because black's pawns are on the opposite color of this dark square bishop. So the bishop can't touch any of the pawns here, and there's a good chance that I could lose. However, after king h2, queen takes d6, one line that I very briefly considered before shifting away to other variations is I did consider this variation with rook to f7, knight to d5, and bishop g7. But I rejected it because after king g6, h5 check, king takes h5, the only line that I saw was rook f5 check, king to g6, bishop e5, and after queen to e6, all of my pieces are discombobulated, the rooks are loose, they're both under attack, the bishop is loose, all my pieces are hanging. And if I move the bishop, I lose the rook. If I move the rook, well, black just sacks the queen, and now as we can count, black has 4 pawns versus 3, and he's completely winning this game. So this is what I saw during the game, but unfortunately, Stonkfish shows us that after h5, king takes h5, I can invert the move order here and play this move bishop e5 first, because if black takes the bishop, I have rook f5 check, winning the queen, and this endgame should be winning because my rook can get behind the pawns here. And technically speaking, black has a very difficult task. In fact, computer doesn't think black even has a chance. This simply is winning. So if I had more time, probably I could have spotted this. But again, I was getting low on time, and I decided to play king f2 instead. And king f2 is actually based on a huge miscalculation, as you'll see very shortly. So I played king f2. Wesley takes the bishop here, and now I play this move rook g5. Now apparently, again, Stockfish says that after rook to e7, I'm apparently very slightly better after queen c3, rook e3, check, and there I guess black can just check, and then how do I do this? I guess I go rook e2, queen d3, and queen d6, and after rook e4, I mean, it's even number of pawns. Probably I have good chances to win. This computer actually thinks it's still a draw after king g7. Again, very, very hard to judge what's going on, but both of us didn't see this. So after queen takes a1, I play this move rook g5, which is a huge blunder here, because this effectively, it doesn't throw the game because Stockfish says it's still zeros, but this is based on a complete miscalculation, and frankly just not being objective enough and thinking that I still could win because the king is stuck on the rim. So after knight d5, I play this move d7, Wesley plays queen to h8, stopping me from queening, and now I play this move rook to e4, which apparently is still a draw, but as I said, at this point I'm getting low, and I completely missed queen f6. When I was calculating, I think when I was calculating king f2, I'd seen this position already on the board with rook e4, and I thought that after knight to c7, I could play something like rook to f5 with the idea of rook f7 and rook e7. One sample line is something like this, for example, and I thought I was winning with the stack on the 7th rank. However, black can actually play queen to f6 check, and after king g1, there's queen d6. Now again, when you're calculating 5-6 moves down the road, you see that mistakes do happen in calculation. And the big mistake for me here is that when Wesley played queen f6, queen d6, when I was considering this position all the way back before I played king f2 on move number 33, just to show you guys that this position, I had already seen the position that we get in the game here when I played king f2. But the problem is, because I was low on time and having to do shorter calculations, I simply thought that rook e6 was winning. But if I play rook e6 here, after queen takes rook, I make a queen. There's queen to e1 check, king h2, queen takes h4, king g1, queen takes g5, and uh-oh, spaghetti-o, I'm simply losing the game. So already here I was very upset. Obviously Stockfish doesn't care. It says it's still a draw. Nobody cares. Chess is a draw no matter what you do. But considering that I'm down a queen here, queen and knight for 2 rooks, I figure if I don't have something fast, I'm probably lost. So I make a queen, Wesley takes, I go rook e6 check, knight f6, and here I blunder with king h2. What I should have played was this move king to f2, because effectively what's happening here is black is in Zugzwang. You can't move any of these pieces on the king side. The knight is pinned by the rook, king is stuck, it has no squares. So black basically only has 3 pieces he can play with, the 2 pawns and the queen. And here, black actually can't do anything after queen d4 and king g3 because it should be a draw. Now, ironically enough, this position is reached in the game, but via a different order, via the wrong one. So here I play king to h2, trying to avoid any queen d4 checks, and Wesley plays queen d4, which is a huge blunder. In this position, if Wesley had played queen c7 check, I can block with a pawn push, but after queen to f7, I can't keep the rook stuck here on these two squares, and I end up losing. So if I go rook d6, there's queen e7, and now the rook has to leave the 6th rank. If I move away, black can just go like knight e4, for example, or frankly, even just knight d5. And even though I have this beautiful rook on g5, the other rook is very passive, and black should be winning. So queen c7 would have been winning. Also, I can play like rook ge5 here, but after rook ge5, black can take and then play knight g4, forking the king and the rook, and black simply has an extra pony and will win the game. Wesley plays queen d4 instead, and praise the Lord, he plays queen d4 because this is a huge blunder. Now, even at this moment, those of you guys who are watching live broadcasts, you'll see I was shaking my head a lot because after queen d4, my initial idea was to play g3, but this loses because after queen b2, king h3, queen to a1, guarding the knight, but threatening to create the checkmate in the corner. Of course, we have our gigantic right triangle here. I'm simply lost because I can't stop this mate without moving the king back, and then there's queen a2 check, winning this rook on e6. So I was shaking my head, very upset, thought I was lost. Fortunately, with about 30 seconds left on my clock, I gathered my wits about me and I played this move king g3 simply because there are no other moves. If I play king to h3, there's queen d7, which pins the rook again, and after rook e5, king g7, black is winning. I can't move the rook and make the check because I would lose the king, and after the king moves, king f7, black is going to sack the queen for the 2 towers. So I play king g3, and fortunately here, this position is actually a draw because black simply cannot move any of his pieces. The knight, the king, and the pawn are glued. The pawns are pretty much glued here as well, and so Wesley tries b6 here, but now I gobble here. He checks, I go king h2, and black has nothing better to do than make a repetition because, in fact, black now only has one piece he can move. You can't move anything except for the queen, because everything else is stuck. The 2 pawns are glued, the knight's glued, the pawn, the king, everything is glued. So here it's only a question of whether black can make enough checks with the queen to somehow untangle, and there simply is actually no way to untangle. Wesley plays queen to f4 here. I go king to h3, he goes queen f1, and now I play rook e6, which is fine. I could have played king h2 back, but I figured just make sure that I keep the rook on the light squares where there are no checks here, and nothing bad can happen. Wesley goes queen f2, I go rook c6 again, just waiting. I also can't really move a whole lot here. I can't move this rook because I don't want to let the king back into the game. Can't move my king because then I hang the pawn. So pretty much all of my pieces are also glued here. It's just a matter of shuffling the rook and hoping that black can't check me and win a rook with his queen. So I go rook c6, Wesley plays queen e3, king h2, queen d4, and now I play king g3. Again, a very important move here that I don't go to h3 because then there's queen d7 checking my king and winning the rook on c6. And if I go g3, same problem where black can check, and now, actually wait, not there, sorry, black can go check, king h3, and now queen f3, threatening checkmate in the corner, but also guarding the knight as well. And I would have to go rook c1, and now after knight h5, knight f4, I'm simply going to lose again. But I play king g3, and Wesley decides to call it a day here. He plays the cutest move on the board, which is queen takes h4 check. And after king takes h4, Wesley has sacked his queen. I have 2 rooks for a knight. But as we have learned in the great game of chess, black cannot move any pieces here. So this is what we call stalemate, and the game ends in a draw, even though I have 2 rooks against a knight. So it's a big shame that I didn't win this game, but that's life. So game ends in a draw here. First game obviously draw in a 2-game mini match. Tomorrow I will be playing against Wesley once again with the black pieces. We'll be playing another game of 90 minutes plus 30 seconds. If that game is a draw, we move to tie breaks and blitz and Armageddon potentially. If I lose, then we move on to the next state where I'll be playing just a rapid match. So we will see what happens. But at any rate, I really hope you guys did enjoy this recap. This is a very exciting game, very tense, very dramatic, even though the result was peaceful. And make sure to hit that subscribe button below if you haven't already. And we'll be back tomorrow with another recap after I either win or lose my game, or if I draw the game, we'll play tiebreakers. But at any rate, we'll be back tomorrow. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll see everybody very, very soon. Bye, you guys.